The sun was setting over the vast expanse of Joshua Tree National Park when Rachel and Daniel Nguyen pulled into their campsite on that October evening in 2016. Rachel was 6 months pregnant with their first child, and this camping trip was meant to be their last adventure, as just the two of them. They had picked Joshua Tree specifically because Rachel had always dreamed of seeing the twisted, otherworldly trees against a desert sunset. Daniel had surprised her with the trip for their third wedding anniversary, carefully planning every detail to make sure his pregnant wife would be comfortable in the wilderness. They set up their bright orange tent near a cluster of the park's famous Joshua trees, completely unaware that within 48 hours, they would vanish without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that would baffle investigators for nearly a decade. 8 years later, on a scorching hot afternoon in July 2024, a solo hiker named Marcus Webbs was exploring a remote section of the park that most visitors never see. He had ventured far off the main trails, drawn by his passion for photographing rare desert plants. As he scrambled over a pile of weathered rocks, something caught his eye. It was partially buried in the sand, but the corner of what looked like orange fabric was visible. When Marcus brushed away the sand and pulled at the material, his blood ran cold. He had just discovered something that would finally answer the question that had haunted two families and an entire community for 8 long years. What he found would reveal a truth so unexpected that it would force everyone to reconsider everything they thought they knew about what happened to Rachel and Daniel Nguyen. The story of the Nguyens begins in San Diego, where they had built what seemed like a perfect life together. Daniel worked as a software engineer for a tech startup, while Rachel taught 4th grade at a local elementary school. They had met 5 years earlier at a mutual friend's barbecue, bonding over their shared love of hiking and outdoor adventures. Their friends often joked that they were the couple who would rather spend their weekends camping than going to fancy restaurants. When Rachel found out she was pregnant in April 2016, they were overjoyed. They had been trying for 2 years, and the news felt like the final piece of their happiness falling into place. As October approached, Daniel noticed that Rachel had been more tired than usual. The pregnancy was taking its toll, and she was spending most weekends resting at home. That's when he got the idea for one last camping trip before the baby arrived. He knew Rachel had always wanted to camp in Joshua Tree, ever since she had seen photos of the unique landscape in a nature magazine years ago. Despite being 6 months pregnant, Rachel was thrilled when Daniel surprised her with the planned trip. Her doctor had given her the green light for moderate physical activity, and she promised to take it easy. They left San Diego on Friday, October 14, 2016, in their silver Toyota RAV4. Daniel had packed everything they might need, including extra water, a satellite phone for emergencies, and a first aid kit. Rachel had posted on social media that morning, sharing a photo of their packed car with the caption, "Baby's first camping trip. Can't wait to show our little one these adventures someday." Friends and family members liked and commented on the post, wishing them a safe and fun trip. Nobody could have imagined it would be the last time anyone would hear from them. The drive to Joshua Tree took about 3 hours. They stopped once for gas and snacks in the small town of Yucca Valley, where a security camera captured them buying water and trail mix at a convenience store. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m. The store clerk later told investigators that they seemed happy and excited, with Rachel rubbing her pregnant belly and Daniel making jokes about teaching their baby to rock climb before they could walk. This mundane interaction would become one of the last confirmed sightings of the couple. They entered Joshua Tree National Park through the west entrance station at approximately 4:15 p.m. The ranger on duty remembered them because Rachel had asked several questions about the safest trails for someone in her condition. The ranger had recommended they stick to the easier paths and provided them with a map, marking several scenic spots that didn't require difficult hiking. Daniel had mentioned they had a campsite reservation at Jumbo Rocks Campground for 2 nights. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Jumbo Rocks Campground is one of the park's most popular camping areas, known for its massive boulder formations and relatively easy access to hiking trails. The Nguyen's site, number 47, was located on the outer edge of the campground, offering more privacy but still within sight of other campers. A family camping 2 sites over later reported seeing them setting up their tent around 5:30 p.m. The mother of that family specifically remembered Rachel because she had walked over to ask about good spots to watch the sunset, mentioning it was their anniversary weekend. That evening passed without incident. Other campers reported seeing their campfire and hearing quiet conversation and laughter. One camper mentioned hearing them discussing baby names, with Rachel apparently favoring traditional names while Daniel preferred something more unique. These normal, happy moments made what happened next even more puzzling and tragic. Saturday morning arrived with typical desert weather, cool in the early hours but promising heat later in the day. A jogger who passed through the campground around 6:30 a.m. noticed their tent was still zipped up, which wasn't unusual. However, this would be the last time anyone definitively saw any sign of the Nguens at their campsite. By Saturday evening, their tent remained exactly as it had been that morning, and their car hadn't moved from its parking spot. It wasn't until Sunday afternoon that anyone realized something was wrong. The campground host noticed that the Nguens hadn't been seen around their site all day, Saturday or Sunday morning. This was unusual because most campers were active during the cooler morning hours. When he walked over to check on them around 2 p.m. on Sunday, he found their tent empty. Their sleeping bags were inside, along with Rachel's prenatal vitamins and Daniel's glasses. Their car was still parked at the site, locked, with their phones inside. The campfire had long since gone cold. The host immediately contacted park rangers, who began an informal search of the nearby trails. They assumed the couple had perhaps gotten lost on a morning hike and would return soon. But as the sun began to set on Sunday with no sign of them, the situation became more serious. A full search and rescue operation was launched at sunset, with teams working through the night, calling out the couple's names and scanning the desert with powerful flashlights. Monday morning brought helicopters, search dogs, and dozens of volunteers. The search effort was massive, covering over 100 square miles of desert terrain. The dogs picked up the couple's scent leading away from their campsite toward a trail called the Skull Rock Loop, but the trail went cold after about half a mile. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. Investigators were puzzled by several factors. First, why would they leave all their supplies behind, including water, if they were going for a hike? Second, why hadn't they told anyone where they were going? And most concerning, why would Rachel, 6 months pregnant, venture into difficult terrain? The search continued for 2 weeks, with teams exploring every mine shaft, cave, and ravine in the area. Joshua Tree's landscape is notoriously dangerous, with many places where someone could fall and not be visible from above. The park contains numerous abandoned mines from the gold rush era, deep crevices between rocks, and dense clusters of Joshua trees and desert scrub that could hide a person from view. Despite the extensive search, not a single clue was found beyond that initial scent trail. As days turned into weeks, theories began to emerge. Some suspected foul play, pointing out that it was unusual for 2 adults to simply disappear without any trace. Others believed they had gotten lost and succumbed to the harsh desert conditions. The temperature in Joshua Tree can swing dramatically, from near freezing at night to over 100 degrees during the day. Without water, survival would be difficult, especially for someone in Rachel's condition. Investigators interviewed everyone who had been in the campground that weekend. Most were families or couples who had seen nothing suspicious. However, one witness mentioned seeing a man in a baseball cap and sunglasses walking near the Nguyen's campsite early Saturday morning. This man was never identified, and some investigators wondered if he might have been involved in the disappearance. But without any evidence of a struggle or crime at the campsite, this lead went nowhere. The families of Rachel and Daniel were devastated. Rachel's mother, Susan, flew in from Ohio and spent weeks in the desert, refusing to give up hope. She organized volunteer search parties long after the official search was called off. Daniel's parents, who lived in Los Angeles, hired a private investigator who specialized in missing persons cases. The investigator spent months interviewing witnesses and exploring the park, but found nothing new. As 2016 turned into 2017, the case grew cold. The Park Service continued to keep an eye out for any signs of the couple, and hikers were given flyers with their photos, but leads dried up. The case was featured on several true crime podcasts and television shows, which brought renewed attention, but no new information. Online forums dedicated to missing persons cases dissected every detail, proposing theories ranging from the plausible to the bizarre. Some internet sleuths suggested the couple had staged their own disappearance to start a new life. They pointed to the fact that Daniel had recently taken out a large life insurance policy. However, investigators found that the policy had been purchased over a year earlier as part of normal financial planning for the expected baby, and neither Rachel nor Daniel had withdrawn any large sums of money before the trip. Their bank accounts remained untouched after their disappearance. Others speculated about more sinister possibilities. Joshua Tree had a history of criminal activity, including drug smuggling routes that passed through the remote areas of the park. Could the couple have witnessed something they shouldn't have? This theory gained some traction when investigators learned that there had been increased Border Patrol activity in the area that weekend, but no connection to the Nguens was ever established. The desert itself remained the most likely culprit in many people's minds. Joshua Tree spans nearly 800,000 acres, much of it wilderness that sees few visitors. The park's unique geology creates countless hiding places. The Joshua trees themselves, with their twisted branches and clustered growth, can disorient hikers. Many experienced outdoors people have reported getting turned around in areas that seemed straightforward. If the couple had ventured off trail and gotten lost, they could have wandered for miles in the wrong direction. By 2018, 2 years after the disappearance, the active investigation was officially suspended, though the case remained open. The families held memorial services, though without bodies. There was no real closure. Rachel's school planted a tree in her memory, and Daniel's company established a scholarship in his name. Life moved on for everyone else, but for the families, questions remained. What had happened that Saturday morning? Where did they go? Why did they leave everything behind? The years passed with occasional false alarms. In 2019, hikers found human remains in the park, but DNA testing proved they belonged to a solo hiker who had gone missing in 2014. In 2021, someone claimed to have seen a couple matching the Nguyen's description in Mexico, but investigation showed it was a case of mistaken identity. Each false lead reopened wounds for the families, who struggled between hoping for answers and accepting that they might never know what happened. Then came that July day in 2024, when Marcus Webb made his discovery. Marcus was an experienced desert photographer who often ventured into remote areas of the park that most visitors never see. He had been following what he thought might be a rare species of barrel cactus when he noticed an unusual rock formation about 2 miles from the nearest trail. The rocks formed a natural shelter, almost like a cave, hidden from view unless you approached from a specific angle. As Marcus got closer to photograph the rocks, he noticed something that didn't belong in the natural landscape. It was a piece of bright orange fabric, the same color as the tent the Nguens had been using. His first thought was that it might be trash blown in by the wind, but as he pulled at it, he realized it was attached to something buried in the sand. Using his hands and a small camping shovel, he carefully excavated the area. What he found was a backpack, weathered by 8 years in the desert, but still intact. Inside, protected from the elements, were items that made Marcus's heart race. There was a wallet containing Daniel Nguyen's driver's license, a digital camera with a dead battery, and most remarkably, a journal wrapped in plastic. Marcus immediately called 911, knowing he had found something significant. Park rangers and investigators arrived within hours, securing the scene and beginning a careful search of the area. What they discovered over the next few days would finally provide answers to the mystery that had haunted everyone for 8 years. Using ground-penetrating radar and careful excavation, they found more items scattered in the natural shelter. There were water bottles, some clothing, and heartbreakingly, a small pair of baby shoes that Rachel had apparently brought along for their unborn child. But the most important discovery was the journal. Rachel had been keeping it throughout their trip, and her final entries provided crucial information about what had happened. The first entries were cheerful, describing the beautiful sunset on Friday night and their plans for a short morning hike on Saturday. But then the tone changed dramatically. According to the journal, they had set out early Saturday morning for what was supposed to be an easy walk to watch the sunrise. Daniel had studied the map and thought he knew a shortcut to a viewpoint another camper had recommended. But as they walked, they realized they had somehow gotten turned around. The landscape that had seemed so clear in the morning light became confusing as the sun rose higher. Every cluster of rocks looked the same, every Joshua tree identical to the last. Rachel wrote about how they tried to retrace their steps but couldn't find familiar landmarks. They had brought water, but only enough for a short hike. As the morning wore on and the temperature rose, they sought shelter in the shade of the rock formation where their belongings would later be found. Daniel had left to try to find help, or the trail, promising to return quickly. That was the last Rachel saw of him. The journal entries became more desperate as Saturday afternoon turned to evening. Rachel wrote about calling out for Daniel, about the increasing pain in her abdomen that she feared meant something was wrong with the baby, about the terrible thirst as their water ran out. She documented seeing search helicopters in the distance but being unable to signal them from her hidden position among the rocks. Her final entry, dated Sunday morning, was barely legible. expressing love for Daniel and their unborn child, and apologizing to their families. The discovery of the journal led investigators to expand their search of the area. Using the details Rachel had provided about which direction Daniel had gone, search teams with cadaver dogs worked systematically through the desert. 3 days after Marcus's initial discovery, they found Daniel's remains about a quarter-mile from the rock shelter. He had apparently fallen into a narrow crevice between 2 large boulders, likely breaking his leg in the fall. Unable to climb out and probably disoriented from dehydration, he had died trying to return to Rachel. A more extensive search of the rock shelter area eventually located Rachel's remains as well, deeper in the natural cave structure where she had apparently crawled, seeking cooler temperatures. The medical examiner determined that both had died from dehydration and exposure, probably within 48 to 72 hours of becoming lost. The tragedy was compounded by the fact that they had been less than 2 miles from their campsite the entire time, hidden in an area that searchers had passed near but not thoroughly explored. The recovery of the bodies and the journal brought a mixture of grief and relief to the families. After 8 years of not knowing, they finally had answers, even though those answers were heartbreaking. Susan, Rachel's mother, told reporters that while she had always held out hope they might somehow be alive, knowing what happened brought a kind of peace. She took comfort in knowing that Rachel and Daniel had been together, that they had tried to survive, and that they had thought of their families until the end. The case prompted new discussions about safety in national parks. Joshua Tree implemented new measures, including more detailed trail markers and enhanced GPS emergency beacons available for rent at visitor centers. They also expanded their education programs about the dangers of going off trail, especially in the desert environment where distances can be deceiving and landmarks can all look similar. Marcus Webb, the hiker who made the discovery, struggled with the aftermath. He had gone out that day simply to photograph plants and had instead solved one of the park's most troubling mysteries. He later said that finding the journal was both the most important and most difficult thing he had ever experienced. Reading Rachel's words, knowing how close she and Daniel had been to rescue, was something that would stay with him forever. The story also highlighted the power of chance in solving cold cases. If Marcus hadn't been looking for that specific cactus, if he hadn't approached the rocks from that exact angle, if the wind hadn't blown the sand away from that piece of fabric at just the right time, the mystery might have remained unsolved indefinitely. Investigators estimated that hundreds of people had hiked within a few hundred yards of the hidden shelter over the 8 years, never knowing what lay just out of sight. The Nguyen case became a cautionary tale for hikers and campers everywhere. It showed how quickly a simple morning walk could turn deadly in the unforgiving desert environment. It demonstrated that even experienced outdoors people could become disoriented, and that pregnant women faced additional risks in extreme conditions. But it also showed the enduring power of love, with Daniel dying trying to save his wife and unborn child, and Rachel holding on as long as she could in hope of rescue. In the aftermath of the discovery, both families established a joint foundation in Rachel and Daniel's memory. The foundation provides emergency beacons to pregnant women and families hiking in national parks, hoping to prevent similar tragedies. They also fund search and rescue training, understanding firsthand how difficult it can be to find someone in vast wilderness areas. The Foundation's first major initiative was placing emergency supply caches in remote areas of Joshua Tree, marked with reflective signals visible from the air. These caches contain water, basic first aid supplies, and emergency blankets. While some argued this might encourage risky behavior, the families felt that if such a cache had existed near where Rachel and Daniel were stranded, they might have survived. Park officials revealed that the area where the couple was found had been searched during the initial operation, but not thoroughly. The rock formation created shadows and angles that made it nearly impossible to see into the natural shelter from most approaches. This led to new search protocols, requiring teams to physically investigate such formations rather than just scanning them visually from a distance. The journal itself became an important artifact, not just for the investigation but for understanding the human element of the tragedy. Rachel's words, ranging from hopeful to desperate, provided insights into their final days that pure forensic evidence never could have. With the family's permission, excerpts were used in survival training courses to help others understand how quickly situations can deteriorate in extreme environments. The digital camera found in the backpack yielded another heartbreaking discovery. Once investigators replaced the battery, they found photos from the couple's final morning. There were pictures of the sunrise, selfies of Rachel and Daniel smiling, and shots of the landscape that had seemed so beautiful before it became their prison. The last photo, taken around 9 a.m. on Saturday, showed Rachel sitting on a rock, hand on her pregnant belly, still unaware of the danger they were in. The case also raised questions about the limitations of search and rescue operations. Despite the massive effort involving hundreds of people, dogs, and helicopters, the search had failed to find the couple just 2 miles from their campsite. This led to research into new technologies, including drones with thermal imaging and satellite tracking systems that could help locate missing persons more effectively. Local indigenous peoples, who had lived in the Joshua Tree area for thousands of years, pointed out that traditional knowledge of reading the landscape might have prevented the tragedy. They offered to work with the Park Service to develop programs teaching visitors how to recognize natural landmarks and navigate using traditional methods that didn't rely on modern technology. The spot where Rachel and Daniel died has not been marked or memorialized at the request of both families. They feared it might become a morbid tourist attraction and preferred that the desert remain as it was. However, park rangers know the location and occasionally check the area, especially when other hikers go missing, understanding now how easily someone can disappear into hidden spaces. 8 years of uncertainty had ended with Marcus Webb's discovery, but the impact continued to ripple outward. Search and rescue teams nationwide studied the case, looking for lessons that could help them find other missing persons. The journal became a key document in understanding the psychology of survival situations, showing how hope and despair can coexist in extreme circumstances. The baby shoes found with Rachel's belongings were returned to the families and became a powerful symbol of the life that was lost before it could begin. Rachel's mother keeps them in a shadow box, along with photos from the couple's wedding and their last social media posts about the camping trip. It serves as a reminder of how quickly joy can turn to tragedy and how important it is to cherish every moment with loved ones. The investigation revealed that Rachel and Daniel had done almost everything right. They had told people where they were going, brought emergency supplies, and stayed together when they realized they were lost. Their tragedy came down to a series of small decisions and bad luck, showing that sometimes even careful preparation isn't enough in the face of nature's indifference. Today, visitors to Joshua Tree National Park often hear the story of the Nguens as part of safety briefings. Rangers don't share it to frighten people, but to illustrate why they stress staying on marked trails, carrying more water than seems necessary, and bringing emergency signaling devices. The couple's story has likely saved lives by making others more cautious. The private investigator who had worked the case for Daniel's parents returned his fee after the bodies were found, saying he couldn't take money for a job that had been solved by chance rather than investigation. He used the case in his teaching, showing other investigators how sometimes the most important thing is to keep a case alive in public memory so that when evidence does surface, people know its significance. Marcus Webb continued his photography but could never quite shake the memory of that day. He wrote about the experience for outdoor magazines, emphasizing how the desert can hide secrets just feet from where people walk. His discovery had brought closure to 2 families and solved a mystery that had haunted a community, but it also served as a stark reminder of how unforgiving the wilderness can be. The final analysis of the case showed that Rachel and Daniel had likely survived for at least 48 hours after becoming lost, possibly up to 72 hours. This meant that during the initial search, they were still alive, hidden in their rock shelter just out of sight. This haunting fact drove improvements in search patterns and technology, with the hope that future missing persons might be found in time. The Nguyen case became a standard study in park ranger training programs across the country. It demonstrated the importance of thinking beyond obvious search areas and understanding how people behave when lost. The fact that they had stayed relatively close to their starting point while believing they were miles away was consistent with documented patterns of disorientation in desert environments. As the 10th anniversary of their disappearance approaches, both families continue their advocacy work through the foundation. They've expanded beyond Joshua Tree, working with national parks across the country to improve safety measures and emergency response protocols. Their tragedy has been transformed into purpose, helping ensure that other families don't endure the same long years of uncertainty and loss. The discovery also led to a systematic review of other cold cases in Joshua Tree and similar parks. Investigators began re-examining areas that might have been overlooked, understanding now how easily the desert can hide evidence. While no other missing persons have been found yet, the new search protocols offer hope that other families might eventually get answers. The story of Rachel and Daniel Nguyen serves as both a cautionary tale and a testament to enduring love. They died trying to protect each other, with Daniel attempting to find help and Rachel holding on in hope of his return. Their final words, preserved in Rachel's journal, spoke of love for each other and their unborn child, rather than blame or anger at their situation. The rock formation where they died remains unchanged, a natural monument to the couple who sought shelter there in their final days. Desert plants have grown around their last campsite, and the winds have erased all traces of their presence. But their story lives on in the safety measures they inspired and the lives that have been saved because others learned from their tragedy. The mystery that had begun with a happy couple heading out for an anniversary camping trip had ended with answers that nobody wanted but everyone needed. The 8-year gap between disappearance and discovery had been filled with anguish, hope, and uncertainty. Now finally there was closure, even if it came with profound sadness for lives cut short and dreams unfulfilled. The lesson from the Nguyen case is clear and sobering. Nature's beauty can quickly become deadly. Careful planning can still go wrong, and sometimes people can be heartbreakingly close to safety without knowing it. Their story reminds everyone who ventures into wild places to respect the environment, prepare for the worst, and understand that the margin between adventure and tragedy can be terrifyingly thin.